Hi, my name is Ivy Starnes, and I'm a gaited horse trainer in Fort Worth, Texas. Today we're talking about how you can tell if your horse has a good trim or a good shoeing. Um, Here's the caveat. I am not a vet or a farrier and have no particular training in this area. I like to ask lots of questions, read lots of articles, and I'm passing on the things that I have learned to you. Here's the thing. I'm assuming that some of the things I'm going to tell you are going to be wrong. I hope they're not wrong because I don't want to have bad trims on my horses and I don't want to mislead you. But I want to share the things I know in an effort to try to help you and your horses, even though I know I'm not an expert in this. But I want to do the best I can. So today I'm going to be showing you some different hooves, a good hoof, what to aim for, and though I show you an ideal foot, it doesn't mean that your foot is going to look exactly the same because horses are different. But there are some basic principles that you want to be looking for. And then I'm also sharing a bunch of articles in the description that you can go ahead and check out some of the research for yourself. Because, of course, we want you to be checking as well. Talk with your farrier. Just because you don't have a good trim now or you're not happy doesn't mean they can't change and work with you. I know finding a good farrier can be difficult depending on what part of the country you live in. All of that can be very challenging. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you, starting with the good foot. So this is my friend Chrissy's horse. Her horse is a Rocky Mountain, and this is the horse's foot. Now, she did tell me that her horse she thought her horse had a good trim, and then she switched farriers and she realized that wasn't the case. But now we do. And we're going to look at a few different things. So first of all, we are going to look at the angles that we see on this foot. So look at angle 1. This is the front of the foot. You can go ahead and check your horses, get down low, take a picture, or just get down low and look. For this first angle, you want to be able to hold a straight edge up to that front of the foot, so like a ruler, but it has to be short, like 4 inches. And ideally, when you hold it up against that foot, you won't see any daylight between it and the foot. If you do, it tells you probably that your toes are too long. This isn't, of course, the only indication that the toes are too long, but if you have any kind of flare or difference in angle by the coronet band and the bottom, then you know your angles are off a little bit. Now, we want to compare angle 1 and angle 3. When we look at gaited horses, or in fact, a lot of horses, we see angle 3 is a much more shallower angle, meaning it's much closer to parallel to the ground. This means that there's no heel or you have underrun heels. The comparison between angle 1 and angle 3 should be almost the same, with possibly angle 3 being slightly steeper than angle 1 or slightly more perpendicular to the ground. Now, this is going to change from horse to horse, but as a general rule, it's kind of what we're looking for. Now, what we're going to see for angle 2 here is a lot of times if your horse has underrun heels. So right now we see angle 2 is, straight across like this, or however you want to look at it. But when we have underrun heels or no heels, that angle will be closer to the ground, or it'll actually curve, and I'll show you that in just a sec. So it'll go from where angle 2 meets angle 1, and it'll curve down to the ground rather than being a straight line. And I recently shared an article about this, and some people were not happy because they didn't take the article in context and or read the article. What the article was saying was that the caudal failure, which we'll talk about in a minute, is caused by open heeled shoes. And they read the article and said, oh, this person hates shoes. Well, that's not the case at all. The trick is that when you have open heel shoes, you allow different processes that are supposed to be touching the ground to sink lower and lower. And they were saying that to fix that, you would need to support the heels, even if you use shoes. So again, here's a good foot. And we're also going to look at it from the bottom. I'm sorry, whoops. Here we go. Sorry. One thing that we're seeing with this foot is that it's round. I'm not going to say that this foot is absolutely perfect, but what we see is that when I pick up other horses' hooves that have long toes, what we start to see is that the hoof gets longer and longer. So instead of being more round, it starts to look like an oval. And that tells you that you're, generally speaking, you have underrun heels and long toes. Now, this alone can help you diagnose if your horse has any troubles. You can go out right now and take a look, pick up your foot, get down, and see what's going on. Okay. Chrissy says hi. Diana says hi. Rachel says hi from Australia. So let's see, I'm going to here. Perry says, this is a flared hoof. The angle should follow what is coming down from the coronet. And I generally agree with that, Perry. So if you were to look at the very, very top angle, right where it comes from the coronet, it is slightly different than the angle that is going down. Now, I say slightly, not because we don't want perfect, but because I see so many horses who have drastic angle changes. And I would say that I would like to see the toe come back possibly a little bit more and that angle to follow it. But again, perfect is an illusion. Yes, we want that, and yes, we want to work to that. But again, whenever I show you another foot, keep in mind that I am just showing you one single snapshot. One moment in time. You don't know where in the trim this horse is. We don't know how long they've had the new farrier or how long it's taken to make this change. So anytime that I show you an example, please hold kind of with honor or be aware that this person is willing for you to look at it, and we're not asking for harsh critique because you don't know everything about this horse or this person's story. And that goes for any time people show me videos. I'm trying to be very careful to allow that we are all on this learning journey and we're at different places. And I don't know. I'm not a farrier. We want to look at and see what the best we can. And if I saw all hooves looking like this, just like this, I would be so happy. I wish it was the case, and it's not. And here again is the bottom of the foot. Let's see here. So we're taking a look at some bad feet in just a sec. Melissa says hi from Cedar Ridge, Colorado. And Max says the back feet are more spade shaped than round. Okay, that's a good point. So that the back feet can look different from the front. But let me clarify something. When I'm looking at horses' feet, it is not usually the back feet that have trouble. This does not mean we ignore the back feet, but the front feet are where gated trainers and gated farriers specifically get into a lot of trouble. But thank you. I love the comments. Don't worry, Max. I knew what you meant. Feet. All right. Let's take a look at some others. Let's look at some underrun heels. So here in this the foot on the left, we see that the angle of the front, it doesn't look bad compared to the pastern, although we don't know if the horse is standing square. But if you look at the heel angle, you can see that it's much shallower than that front line, and that's bad. Now, I show you a comparison with both shoes and not with shoes to show you it can be both barefoot and with a shoe that causes problems. So in this right image, you'll see a barefoot horse. You'll see that the angle from the coronet band almost matches the angle all the way down to the ground, but there are no heels. Also, take a look at the angle. So where Chrissy's horse had a straight angle number 2. When you look at this one, see how it goes straight and then it curves down to the ground? This shows you that this horse has been like this for a little while and is losing that heel bulb, losing that hoof capsule there in the back, which is not good. We want to work at getting that back. Okay, let's see. Next, here's Underrun Heels 2. I found this image on one of the groups that I'm on. They have a lot of really good resources, and I'll make sure to put a link to that Facebook group in the description of the video. The top 4 images are a good or better foot. It looks to me like there's still a little bit of underrun heel, but when we compare it to the foot on the bottom, we can see definite problems with the angles. So again, The top one they say is an anatomically correct foot. I disagree slightly because that angle goes down to the ground. If you look at, where this angle number two here, it's going down, slope down, and there's actually not a lot of heel. But we can definitely see a difference between the top foot and the bottom foot. See how that angle goes right down to the ground, and there's practically no heel under the horse. Those heels should be brought back. And that's super important to be aware of. Those are things that anybody can just walk out to the pasture and look at your horse's foot and say, what do we see? And then you can also compare it to trims later on down the road. Okay. Max says, this one throws off the pasture and will cause problems with the leg. Anytime there's a bad trim, it does cause problems later on. Just like if you ride a young horse, you may not see any issues for 20 years, but there will still be issues. It's just easy to push those off down the road and go, well, they're not affecting me now. All right, next one, caudal failure. So this is the one that was very controversial that I posted. So on the left, you see a foot. This is barefoot. Apparently this horse has been barefoot for a lot of years. And you see how there's very little dip in the back. And then as we go look at the next two images, we see that angle drops down. And the person who posted this video wasn't saying that shoes were bad. They were literally saying that shoes with unsupported heels or unsupported back of open-heeled shoes were the problem. And it's a great point. It's like, why does everybody use open-heeled shoes? Why not use more like an egg bar shoe? I am not going to say whether you should shoe or not shoe your horse yet. We're going to get into that in just a minute. But I want you to take a look. Go out, take a look at your horse. See if these are issues. What does it look like? It doesn't mean that there's anything horribly wrong or that you can't fix it. It just gives you I'm giving you some diagnostic tools that you can take, talk to your vet, talk to your farrier, do your own research, and come up with answers. All right. Next up, so we talked about caudal failure, and you can look at the back, and that aligns with that angle number 2. And that angle number 2 drops down, you're going to see the back starting to look like the bad images there. Hoof pastern alignment. A is more ideal. When the horse is standing square, the angle of the pastern fits with the angle of the hoof. Now, these images are, in my opinion, slightly deceptive because it's following the angle, not necessarily of the front hoof angle, but of where we think the coffin bone is inside the horse. But it gives you an idea what not to look for. So B and C are both incorrect. So C is somewhat common to see in walking horses or in any gaited horses, where you have a long toe and no heel, and you get kind of this angle change. And I just want to show it to you as an example. That's generally what you'll see that's incorrect. Now B, you'll tend to see more of that like in quarter horses, but I have seen that as well. And I just wanted to show you that for reference. It's not a perfect image in my opinion, but I just wanted you guys to see some more things that you can help use to diagnose. Next, breakover. This is just a cool image. Shows you how breakover works. So on the left, you see the too long toe, and you can see how long it would take the horse to break over, and then you can see a more accurate where it should be so that the breakover happens quicker. Now, I don't have any images for this next, but we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about shoes. I am going to tell you why I don't like shoes, but that does not mean that you should not shoe your horse, okay? But I'm going to tell you things to be aware of that you can watch for within your horse's own feet if you're using shoes. Horse's foot is a vacuum pump, all right? When the foot lands, this is a barefoot horse, young horse, whatever. When the foot lands, it opens up. The impact opens the foot, and by doing that, opens up the veins, draws blood into that foot. When it picks up again, when there's no pressure on that foot, it closes down and pushes blood out. This is now pumping. Because of this, we've learned that the horse's foot, we used to think it just grew from the coronet band down, but that's not entirely accurate. it grows down from the coronet band, but also from the inside, which is where the blood supply is. So it makes sense that the hoof also grows outward and fixes itself from the inside, which is where the blood, where nutrients and everything comes, and the bone, right? Where is blood created? It's in the bone. So we're seeing that happen there, that movement. Now let's talk about shoes. When you put a shoe on, you do that while the foot is in the air. So that's when it's in its closed position, because there's no weight bearing on it, and all the blood is, not all the blood, but the blood has been pushed out as a general rule. So they put the shoe on when it's in its closed position, and when the horse goes to land, of course, now it can't spread because steel is very rigid, and the horse's weight is not enough to get that opening, okay? So what we're seeing is that now all of a sudden we have a lack of movement in the entire hoof itself. God made horses to have them land on their foot. It moves. The entire process moves. There's a whole studies done on that. But what we're seeing is that all of a sudden it's not moving. And what will happen without that constant pumping action of having that impact and moving, what will happen is there's thousands of little blood vessels that go out to the lamina, right out to the edge of that hoof wall. And when there's not being pumped in and out, those little blood vessels die, which, again, blood vessels grow and cut back and things like that, and that's okay. But the problem is when those die, the foot shrinks because it's not pushing that nutrition all the way out to the foot. That foot gets smaller and smaller. This is a big argument for taking shoes off when it's wintertime or when you don't need them, because that now allows that pumping action to continue. So let's say you need shoes during the year or during a few months or even just a month if you take a vacation where it's rocky. Pull those shoes off when you're done and let the horse's foot recover. Or if you need them all year round, but of course you probably don't need them in the winter or in the very muddy time, take those shoes off and let that horse's foot breathe and open up and know that that foot is going to get bigger. So you're going to need a bigger shoe possibly if you go months. So if you have shoes on and you take the shoes off and the horse's foot expands, it's trimmed, it goes months without a shoe, and your farrier comes, your shoes, it should be a different size. If that foot is opened up and expanded, you would need a different shoe. Now, Perry says, or get hoof boots, and we're coming to that. Shoes are sometimes necessary, and I completely understand that. But there are other alternatives. There's acrylic or synthetic shoes, which use more like polymers or plastics. Some endurance riders put those on and take them off as they need them by the ride. Hoof boots are a great option. I have friends who use, they ride all over the U.S., rocky terrain, and they use, I blanked on the name. They use a hoof boot. I think it's the Renegade, the hoof boots. And they ride with those. A lot of people don't want to deal with it. That's fine. But we're letting you know that every action we take with our horses, including riding, including everything we do with them, has consequences and has reactions. Be aware of what is happening with your horse's feet. Even if they're barefoot, be aware of what's happening, because there can be issues with barefoot horses as well. I want to go, one of the articles that I share in the description is talking about heart of the hoof, and the article is by Annie Riddle, but she's doing research based on Dr. Robert Bowker's research, and some of the articles I've linked to are by him. I'm just going to read this, and this is anti-shoe, but I know that I'm just reading from this article. Dr. Robert Bowker's research on hoof mechanics further demonstrates the detrimental effects on locking the foot down and not allowing it to function properly. Correct mechanics are only achieved when the horse lands heel first. Think of blood perfusion into the hoof as being like a garden soaker hose, which emits a fine spray along its length, nourishing the tissues and nerves as it goes. When we inhibit the correct action and mechanics of a hoof, the blood shoots into the foot and right back out without reaching the microvessels. This lack of blood flow results in nerve damage and the horse loses feeling in its foot. Should have read this article yesterday when we talked about tripping, because this is talking about directly where I talked about landing toe first facilitates tripping. And this is even for barefoot. But what if your horse has a shoe And what if he's been shot and he loses feeling in his foot? Do you think he's more likely to trip? Well, of course. This does not mean that shoes are always bad, but be aware of what's going on. Again, I had people really upset with me about that post that was showing different things, but I want people to do the research. Okay? The natural perfusion of blood into the hoof also plays a large role in shock absorption. As the hoof loads and fills fully with blood, it dissipates the energy and shock of the landing. As it lifts off the ground, the blood leaves the hoof and circulates back into the legs and through the body and the heart. Without this blood cushion, the shock is absorbed by the ligaments and tendons and joints. We don't really know the overall effects this lack of circulation has on the rest of the horse's body, such as his kidney, liver, heart, etc. In humans, hypoxia occurs when one or more regions of the body are cut off from blood flow and deprived of oxygen, leading to gangrene and necrosis of the affected limb. Generalized hypoxia mostly affects the brain, heart, pulmonary vessels, liver. Okay. Could that same generalized hypoxia be occurring in horses with diminished hoof mechanics? Which ties into what I said earlier, is that all those blood vessels, when they're not getting the full blood supply all the way to the end, what happens is they can start to die off, which makes the foot smaller and contracts. All right. Jody says, excellent explanation. Chrissy says, better use hoof boots. Crystal says, I can't wait to get back to no shoes. Hoof boots are much better and cheaper, even if the boots are expensive. Patty, that's who I was talking about, thanks for chiming in, says they use Renegades, and they have for 15 years, and they ride their horses all over. Jan says Renegade Vipers and Swiss Gallopers. Perry says the boots that fit your horse. Different boots fit different horses. Of course. I wasn't promoting Renegades. I was suggesting ones that I know my friends have used. Sue says great info. Can't talk. Lisa says both my horses are barefoot. Okay. So yes, there's different boots and they'll fit different horses. Unfortunately, I can't tell you one size that'll fit everybody. Even if you have to put shoes on for a ride, let's say your horse is ridden where it's not rocky and you're about to go ride someplace where it's really rocky and you put shoes on for a month. Okay, that probably isn't going to have awful long-term effects, but leaving your horses in shoes all the time, you can see how, I'm hoping you'll see how there could be some issues. But barefoot trimming also has issues, what I talked about in the first half of this video. So be aware of that. Also, look at Thrush for shod and unshod horses for those that live in dry climates and wet climates. Take a look at my video. If there is at all a crack through the heel, it doesn't matter if it smells or not, check for Thrush. Okay? Horses can be lame, and I know so many people, your farrier and your vet may not say anything. You would not believe the number of stories where I pick up a horse's foot, I say your horse has thrush, they say my horse was trimmed last week, the farrier didn't say anything. Be your own horse's advocate. Check. Learn about what thrush looks like from my video, other videos, I don't care. Do your due diligence. Be a good horse owner. This is not expensive. Sometimes things that I recommend are expensive, like getting a saddle that fits, body work. Treating thrush is not necessarily expensive, and you can do it at home. Check for thrush. Okay, off my soapbox. So here's continuing reading this article. When I first began studying the negative effects of shutting down hoof mechanism, I witnessed something I will never forget. I was trimming at a client's farm on a cold winter day. Out in the paddock, the horse that was shod on all 4 feet. He was noticeably very uncomfortable and distressed as he shifted from foot to foot, cautiously laying down and getting up. It was not colic. The thing that stuck in my mind to this day was how the horse's hair was frosted with ice from the hooves all the way up to the middle of his belly. My heart sank in despair as I was unable to help this poor horse who was obviously in pain. The horse's hooves has shunts in them that open and close on demand to regulate the foot's temperature. When you interfere with the horse's hoof's mechanism, my quote is read, think putting a shoe on in the winter, we prevent those shunts from working correctly, and the horse can no longer regulate his overall temperature. In conclusion, whenever we impair hoof mechanism, including bad trims, and reduce blood flow to the foot, 80% of the shock absorption is lost, placing stress on ligaments, joints, heart, lungs, and other organs. The loss of shock absorption increases impact on the front legs, and those forces acting on the hoof and body is one of the direct contributors to EIPH, which is exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage in racehorses. In order for the horse to function and perform at its optimal and healthiest level, the mechanics of his hooves need to be operating fully and correctly. The link to that link to that article is in the description, and she goes on a little bit more. And you don't have to believe this. And I'm not trying to say you should only ever do barefoot, because there are times, if I were to take my horse Jackson riding in the mountains, his feet would not hold up. I would have to do boots or put shoes on. Now, he's never had shoes on, so I'd probably do boots. Okay, let's see. Chrissy says she just ordered East boot gloves soft. I'd love to hear how that works for you. Teresa says, thank you, Miss Ivy. You're welcome, Teresa. Elizabeth says, I use boots when riding rocky terrain. I love them. They are all good, but they all have differences. You just need to find the best boot for your horse's feet. They could even wear an easy boot on the front and another brand on the back. Good point. Work with your farrier, watch fitting videos, and if interested, give it a try. They use easy boot gloves. That's a great comment. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Crystal says, she asked this question, so anybody can answer her. She says, are y'all riding front and back boots, just fronts? And I know some people do all four, and some horses only need on the front. And that's probably a case where you need to see what your horse needs and should use. Jan says, some aluminum shoes do have give now for flex. That's excellent. We are making so much progress with polymers and acrylics and things like that. Chrissy replied and says she only puts boots on the front. Elizabeth says, my horse abscessed the day after I removed her shoes, but I so agree with a natural foot. I went to a 7-week rotation for trims. Her feet are good and the soles are good now. I have Cavallo treks for my rocky trail rides. I love them. Yeah, I actually know of a farrier who said they had this horse. I think it was a quarter horse, not a gaited, or a dressage horse. Maybe it was a dressage horse, like a warm blood. And this horse had been in shoes forever. And I think it was a famous person's horse. You might recognize the name if I said it. And this horse had, the feet were so constricted. He'd been in shoes for so long. He wasn't riding well and doing tests well. And so they ended up, the farrier came, and they called him because he was a specialist and the horse wasn't sound. And he took the shoe off. He said that horse put his foot down, rested his weight on it, and literally there was a pop and the foot started bleeding. Now that sounds awful, but it was also amazing because they let that foot open up, and I believe within a few months that horse was completely sound and barefoot. And that's not to say that people that use shoes are doing it all wrong. But are those shoes fitted correctly? Are you giving your horse time to not have shoes on? I personally know horses who have feet that are sensitive and would not do well on gravel or rocks. However, there's a couple options. Let me tell you some things that I haven't personally used, but friends have told me. So I know there's a thing called Hoof Armor that you can apply to the bottom of your horse's foot, and that helps. Also, on Monday's video, a lady commented and said she does a mixture of Epsom salts and water and iodine and soaks the horse's feet for 45 minutes a day for a few days, toughens up the feet. I have not tried that. I've also heard similar things with an apple cider vinegar and water mixture. Soaking them a few times a week can help harden the horse's feet. Now that, compared to the price of shoeing and the long-term price of having their foot locked down, is very cheap and doesn't take much time at all. Tanya says that composite shoes are a great option. We've come so far with composites. It's amazing. Christy says, oh, there we go, Hoof Armor. Yeah, another good option for hoof protection is a product called Hoof Armor. Yes, I have heard that recommended by multiple people. Again, I haven't personally used it, but I know lots of friends who are good horse people that recommend this. Elizabeth says she uses front boots only. Shanna says, she says, I go barefoot as much as possible. When using boots, the cloud and the glove have worked best for my ponies. Thanks for that comment. That's great. It gives people so many options. Chrissy says, I did shoes on Callie for 3 months and she had a toe crack. It's completely gone now. Patty says, with their horses that they ride all over, they've only needed fronts. Vicky says, I shoe all riding season and take off for winter. My one horse has very flat feet and gets too wide in the winter and takes half of summer to get back to a nice shape. I would think that wouldn't be too much of an issue if you maybe trim a little bit more often, Vicky, but I'm not a farrier, so okay. I know horses' feet can change shape. Hopefully, a good farrier can help those feet stay closer to and not spread out so much. That seems like maybe a trimming issue. Max says, excess bar is a very common problem. Yes, I've actually just been reading about that. Encourage everyone to study about bars. She uses easy boots on the rocks with her barefoot Tennessee walking horse. So yeah, I've actually been reading about how if you leave the bars too long, it causes all kinds of problems, including lameness. So go ahead and do your research about that. Laura says, using easy boot gloves, soft this summer works great and they stay on. Alicia says, Venice turpentine in the soles only can help strengthen the soles of the foot. Elizabeth said, I use hoof heel once a week all over, including frogs, and it really helps with cracking. That is great to know. Thanks, Elizabeth. Perry says, please mention that horses with sensitive feet may have metabolic issues as the underlying cause. Yes, good point, Perry. There is a lot that goes on with horses and their metabolism. Overweight, underweight, in good health and shape, and we're actually hopefully talking about that next week. A note, Chrissy says, a note on Hoof Armor. I rode 34 miles in May at Pole Canyon Ranch in Red Rock Canyon of West Texas. Callie checked in and out perfectly sound, and that's barefoot without hoof boots. Max says, friend who does endurance shoes with Epona shoes. They support the whole hoof. That's a great resource. I'm looking them up really quickly. So Epona shoes are basically, they cover and support the whole foot. You can definitely look those up if that interests you, for those of you that ride a lot on rocky terrain. It doesn't have to be metal shoes. The farrier I had back in Illinois, Molly Arvin, she was amazing, and there was quite a few horses that she would do polymer shoes on, and they can go on and off, but that helps the foot flex, which is the biggest issue we're having with metal shoes, is that the foot can't move how it's supposed to. So I'm going to go back. If you missed the beginning, we talk about what to check for, and before I went on a rant about shoes, this is what a good foot looks like. At least if all feet looked like this, it would be amazing. So keep that in mind. And fronts and backs can look a little bit different. Hopefully you guys will do your own research. There's links in the description to articles and a video about how to diagnose thrush. I had thrush in my own horse's feet, and I know what to look for, and it kept coming back, sometimes in just one foot on one horse, and none of the other horses would have it. Sometimes it would be wet, and sometimes it would be dry out. I went and worked with horses who were in a fairly dry climate, and they all had thrush, and on all 4 feet, and the owners didn't know. The farrier nor vet didn't tell them. Do your own due diligence, do your own research, check your own horse's feet. Okay, thank you guys for watching. If you would mind, please share this to the groups you're in, the different horse groups, so we can spread the word and people can learn about the horse's feet. And we can have gaited horses with a correct trim, or at least better. I would love to stop having to look at their feet and check and see if they need to get a new farrier. Thank you again for watching. You guys are doing so good. Next week, I want to announce this. Next week, assuming we have time, probably Monday or Tuesday, we're going to do a video where I'm going to get my husband Parker to answer your questions. So watch for a post about that, and I'll look for you guys to submit questions for Parker to answer, and then he'll answer live questions as well. And then also we're gonna and then also tomorrow I have a video on how to add energy to the lazy horse. So that's for tomorrow. Next week, try to catch the video. Then Parker will answer all your questions about gaited horses. He's been to I think 7 clinics with me, so we'll see how many questions he can answer. Really briefly, a couple of quick comments from people. Elizabeth says, note when you use hoof boots, you need to keep your horse's feet trimmed regularly. It's possible that the foot could grow enough to not fit the boot. Great point. Shanna says, no thrush, powder works great. Patty says, thanks, Ivy, great info. You're welcome, Patty. Elizabeth says, thank you, great resource. Jody says, thank you. Megan says, thank you. Max also says, you can soak facial pads in white lightning and stuff it in the cracks to help with stubborn thrush. Great point. And Shelly says, great info today, thanks. You guys are so welcome. You guys are amazing, and keep at it. You got this.